talking today to Gary Rathbone, who's the founder of Sports News Africa and a former head of Supersports. Gary, what is Sports News Africa?
Well, Russell, what we've done with Sports News Africa is to try and create a product, a show basically, to try and fill a gap which I think exists as far as free-to-air broadcasters is concerned. We know how much sports content is available on the pay TV networks, but I think very little sports content of quality is available on the free-to-air networks, and I think that's where the vast sort of majority of the African sports fans are. And I think there's a gap really to create good content, for that market. So Sports News Africa really is an attempt to kind of fill that gap and create programming that could be exciting and relevant to audiences across the continent.
And this could be individual programs and maybe even a channel.
Well, the idea is to start off with individual programs, is to try and create the things that we think will resonate with viewers right now, and will provide the kind of content that free-to-air broadcasters are looking for. I think it's important to bear in mind that free-to-air broadcasters have very little space available to them in the current situation, being in a single analog channels. But as that changes with the digital migration taking place, I think that there'll be a lot more opportunities to move the Sports News Africa concept into a full 24/7 channel.
So we may see free-to-air sports channels in Africa.
Absolutely, I think a free-to-air sports channels are that's going to become a norm, because if you're talking about free-to-air broadcasters suddenly finding themselves with 5 or 6 digital channels available to them, it's going to be obvious that one of those channels they want to want sport on that in one of those channel spaces.
So what are the big sports that people are interested in Africa on television?
Well, I think everybody sort of thinks that football is the major sport across Africa, but I think it's pretty true of the world, and Africa's no different in that respect. But the fact of the matter is that if you dig below the surface, there's quite a wide range of sports, get quite a wide range of interest in very different territories. East Africa in particular, I think, is quite a complex sporting culture there, where there's football certainly is popular, but then so is rugby. Sevens rugby has a massive following across East Africa, and particularly Kenya and Uganda. But even 15s rugby as well, is well supported. Cricket obviously has a strong following as well. And then places like Ethiopia and Kenya, athletics, we know how successful athletes have been from that area. But the biggest surprise that most people aren't aware of is how popular motorsport actually is in that region. East Africa is
Formula One?
Formula One is very, very, people love it because it's motorsport from a TV point of view, but the off-road stuff is huge. They have practically every weekend in Kenya and Uganda, there's a motorsport event taking place somewhere in one of those countries, and it's well attended as well. People really love off-road stuff, off-road bikes, rallies, that kind of stuff. It's really, really popular. If you look to Nigeria and in West Africa, you see basketball has a lot of popularity, and polo is quite popular in West Africa. In Ghana and Nigeria, it has quite a lot of traction there.
And basketball too is kind of.
Basketball is very, very popular in Nigeria, and it's definitely a sport that I think has got a lot of potential
Angola
to
as
grow.
well.
Angola, basketball is very popular in Angola, and growing. It's also a growing popularity in East Africa too. I think basketball is a sport that has a lot of potential, I think, from a media point of view, and certainly from getting fans and sponsors interested.
You were the man who brought Zambian women's boxing to Supersport. What else is there out there that is kind of like that is kind of unusual and different?
Well, yeah, women's boxing, that was really exciting. Esther Perry that we had a chance to put on television. I mean, I think it was important. I felt that when I was at Supersport was to try and bring more and more sports into the spectrum. But yeah, I mean, there's things like in Senegal, the Senegalese wrestling, which has a massive following. I mean, the kind of audiences that respond to that in Senegal itself and online through the diaspora is in the millions, basically. It's actually extraordinary. So there's a lot of really interesting sports that if you think about it, and if broadcasters and sponsors thought about it and really started investing and looking at, there's an opportunity for a lot of people to start actually doing a lot more with sport in Africa.
And this is at the local sports league level?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is what's happening on the ground, in these countries, and it just would take some sort of, a bit of investment, a bit of support from a broadcaster with a sponsor, get that kind of thing on television, and I think people would be surprised at how effective and the kind of response that they would get, from audiences to that.
And how will the way that sports fans view sport change? What will be the impact of, I don't know, new technologies and social media?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very fundamental changes coming up in the African media landscape in the next couple of years. I think the idea of subscription television as a business model, I think, is really coming to its end. I think broadband is going to play a key role in things going forward. I think that the engagement with sport is going to be much more conversational. I mean, that's our whole approach with Sports News Africa, is the idea being that we want to kind of move into the conversational space of the sports fan in Africa. Not so much worried about the live event as much as the conversation, I think, is going to become more important. And in this respect, I think social media, and then obviously using things like the mobile phone, but I think more importantly like iPads and Galaxy Tabs and things like that, that these things will become, rather than second screen experiences, more and more they'll become the first screen experiences, as people find them very, very cheap and efficient ways to actually view content and sports content on the go.